away from the furthest place possible. And then it said, and he prayed that he might die and said, "It is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers." Then as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Arise and eat." So he's miserable. This is Elijah at his lowest point. You know? This is, of all Old Testament heroes, he's maybe number one. He's the strongest of all Old Testament heroes. He's the most powerful. He commanded the most respect from kings. And he's saying now, I want to die. Stuff it. This life isn't worth it. And God's response is, hey, just get up and have something to eat. So he eats. Then he looked, and there by his head was a cake based on coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came back the second time and touched him and said, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." And then it says in verse 8, so he arose and ate and drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. So we've stopped the two stories at the same point. Moses is struggling on behalf of all the Israelites. Elijah is going through deep personal struggles. And what's both of their response to this struggle? Stop eating, to fast, to spend time in the presence of God. I don't know about you, but when I'm upset about something, or when I'm suffering, or when I'm in any kind of pain, the first thing I do is I find, any chocolates, or I find, you see in movies, the first thing they do is they find ice cream, and they just eat out of the bucket. And that's what I do. We eat our sorrows away. But for Moses and Elijah, their response, their reaction is to add more suffering, to struggle more in fasting. What they did by doing this, like I said before, was they redirected that struggle. They directed their struggles towards God. God, this is what I'm struggling with. I'm directing it towards you. It's in your hands now. And we'll see what happens to both of them. In Exodus 34, continuing the story of Moses, now it was so when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, this is immediately after God reveals his back to Moses. After 40 days and 40 nights of fasting, he reveals his back. He says, "You can't see my face, but I'm going to walk past you and you're going to see my back." And that's what he did. What he does. Now it was when Moses came down from Mount Sinai that Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone while he talked to him being God. And then for Elijah in 1 Kings 19, 11-12, then he said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. When I redirect my struggles towards God, He provides His grace in the form of His presence. Moses, struggling, redirects that struggle into his fasting and prayer and interacts with the glory of God. Elijah, struggling with a sense of rejection, a sense of hopelessness, perhaps even despair, redirects that struggle towards God in fasting and prayer, and God's response is His presence, is His voice. So how does God show His sufficient grace in times of my struggle? He shows up. That's the best kind of grace that He can give us. He shows up, He presents Himself. Even though I don't deserve it, He presents Himself. So the last question is, where is God's grace when I need it most? You wouldn't be alone in pondering that question. Okay, these are nice stories, but how come when I need God's grace, when I need Him to show up, He doesn't show up? How come when, everyone around me seems like they've got things figured out, and I'm sitting here suffering, I'm sitting here struggling, I'm sitting here begging God to hear me out. I'm sitting here begging God just for a word of comfort every single day. I pray every single day. I read my Bible every single day. I take the fast seriously. I serve Him all the time. How come He doesn't answer me? It's a fair question. When is He going to show up? How come He doesn't show up when I need Him the most? The most. And like I said, you would not be alone in wondering that question. I'm going to read to you something. It's a bit long, but I want you to try and hear the words, and then I'll tell you who it is after. From my childhood you have called me and kept me for your own, and now when we both have taken the same road, now Jesus, I go the wrong way. They say people in hell suffer eternal pain because of the loss of God. They would go through all that suffering if they just had a little hope of possessing God. In my soul I feel just that terrible pain of loss, of God not wanting me, of God not being God, of God not really existing. That darkness surrounds me on all sides. I can't lift my soul to God. No light or inspiration enters my soul. I speak of love for souls, of tender love for God. Words pass through my lips, and I long with a deep longing to believe in them. I beg of you only one thing. Please do not take the trouble to return soon. I am ready to wait for all eternity. Does anyone know who wrote that? Dan? Anyone want to take a guess? Not Pope Shenouda. But Pope Shenouda has a very similar quote on prayer and dryness in prayer. Any other guesses? This is from one of the journal entries by Mother Teresa. Did you guys guess that? That was no. You can find it in a book titled "Come Be My Light," which is just a collation of all her journal entries. This is Mother Teresa, and now that you know who it is, I'll just continue and read something that she writes a little bit later on. Now, Father, since 1949, she's writing this in 1960. Since 1949, this terrible sense of loss, this untold darkness, this loneliness, this continual longing for God, which gives me that pain deep down in my heart. Darkness is such that I really do not see, neither with my heart nor with my reason. The place of God in my soul is blank. There is no God in me. When the pain of longing is so great, I just long and long for God. Then it is that I feel He does not want me. He is not there. This is Mother Teresa, who, you'd be forgiven for thinking she never missed a day of prayer in her life. She never missed a Sunday of, the liturgy, any liturgy on Sunday. She never missed, or she never put in a half effort into the fast. She never missed an opportunity to read her Bible. This is Mother Teresa who's praying in the midst of her darkness, in the midst of her struggle, and she's saying, "Where are you?" to God. Where is your grace when I need it the most? Mother Teresa. Again, looking at a biblical example, Job, who went through suffering that, we water it down so much because we hear it all the time. We even make jokes about Job, God took everything from him, but He left him his wife, so He added to his suffering. We make jokes about it, but we water down the suffering that he went through. He went through suffering we can't even express. He lost all his kids, lost all his cattle, lost all his wealth, lost everything, lost his home. He lost everything. And we sometimes even water it down because of the words of Job himself. We remember, naked I came, naked I shall return. Blessed be the name of God. That's nice. And it shows who he was as a faithful servant. But he also had moments of doubt. He also expressed the pain that his suffering warranted. In Job 7, he said to God, he asked Him, "Have I sinned? What have I done to you, O watcher of man? Why have you set me as your target so that I'm a burden to myself?" And he goes on to ask Him, Where is your grace? When his friends accuse him. And then in Psalm 13, again, King David, who had a heart like God's, says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and hear me, O Lord my God." The issue we really have, like these saints, Mother Teresa, Job, King David, and the list goes on, Jeremiah, Joseph, Jonah. The issue we have is not that he's not there. You know, we know he's there. The issue we have is not that he's not there, is that he's silent. And so we question the presence of grace because he's silent, because he's not giving us the answers that we desire or the solutions that we need. And the reason that God doesn't speak up earlier is because he knows that when he eventually shows up, it's going to transform us. He doesn't want to just fix the problem, right? He doesn't want to just, give us an answer or give us a solution. He wants to transform us, right? Again, if we go back to the story of the child in the woods, he doesn't want to just come and fix his issue of hunger. He doesn't want to just come and quench his thirst. He doesn't want to just come and, here's a pillow, right? The kid's tired and the father is rocking up in the woods to this poor boy who's broken, alone, hungry, thirsty, and you look tired. Here's a pillow, blanket, get some rest. I'll come back tomorrow with some water. He doesn't do that. He wants to take him home and elevate him. And the reason I know that that's the case is because, again, we have a biblical example in the story of the prodigal son, right? The prodigal son, he just wanted to come home and be a servant. The father wanted to bring him into his house and make him his son. See the difference? We're after a solution, a quick, easy fix, because that's what we're used to these days. God, I'm struggling, I need an answer. I'm hungry, Uber Eats. I'm lonely, WhatsApp, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram. I'm bored, YouTube. I'm really bored, TikTok. We have quick fixes to our problems, however trivial, however petty. We have quick, easy fixes, and we expect the same thing with God. But God holds back. He holds back. He waits until the moment he knows that if he shows up now with the answer we want now, it's going to transform us. There's a really nice book called The Prodigal God by Timothy Keller. And he writes this in it: God's love and forgiveness can pardon and restore any and every kind of sin or wrongdoing. It doesn't matter who you are or what you've done. It doesn't matter if you deliberately oppressed or even murdered people or how much you've abused yourself. The younger brother knew that in his father's house there was abundant food to spare, but he also discovered that there was grace to spare. There is no evil that the Father's love cannot pardon and cover. There is no sin or struggle that is a match for His grace. There is no sin or struggle that is a match for His grace. And it's a grace that's worth waiting for. It's worth waiting for. It's worth it in my period of struggle to wait on God, because I know that when He comes, even if it's at rock bottom, when He comes, it's going to transform me. It's okay to wait. Even when we look at those stories that we spoke about before, specifically the story of Job. In Job 42, so God eventually shows up in about Job chapter 38. And instead of giving Job comfort, does anyone know what God does? He starts to question him and rebuke him for those few questions that Job asked him. Have I sinned? What have I done to you? Why have you made me a target? He asked a few questions and God's like, okay, answer these questions. And then he proceeds to ask him 72 questions. Were you there when I created the earth? Were you there when I put the moon and the stars in the sky? Were you there when I created the beasts of the field? Were you there when I created the fish in the sea? Where were you when I did this? Well, how old were you when I was doing this? And he starts rebuking him. And this goes on for 3 chapters straight. And you might think, if you're Job, like, haram alaik, like, haven't I suffered enough? Now you're coming and you're rebuking me? But Job didn't see it like that. Just being in the presence of God was grace enough for Job, and he responds by saying in Job chapter 42 verse 5, a verse that I think is extremely underrated because of what he says at the beginning of the book. In fact, I think it's the most poetic part of the entire book. He says to him, I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. For Job, it was sufficient enough to see the presence of God, to witness the presence of God. That was grace enough for him. And notice that his struggle wasn't gone. He still had no kids. He still had no home. He still had no cattle. His wealth was still gone. His wife was still bugging him. He still was in his struggle. But all of a sudden he realizes, I'm not struggling alone. That's what grace is. Grace is company in times of struggle that gives me strength to endure. It's company in times of struggle that gives me strength to endure. And more specifically, it's the company of God. And I'll just finish by finishing the story I began at the beginning of the lady from the GP. For those that came late, quick recap. Met this lady in the GP. She was speaking to the doctor and telling him about the struggles of her son, who was molested as an 11-year-old boy by a Catholic priest on a camp. And for 20 plus years of his life, he was on heavy antidepressants, seeing a psychiatrist multiple times a week, and contemplating taking his life every single day. She would sleep on the ground of his bedroom just until he fell asleep so that she could be sure that he didn't harm himself. She leaves. I can't breathe. I ask the doctor for some fresh air. I walk outside, and who should I run into but her? I tried playing I didn't see you there, and look away, because what am I going to say? There's nothing I can say. But I realized it'd be a lot more awkward if I just walked straight past her than if I went up to her and said anything. At the time, I had on a bracelet. It was from a camp that we had just recently had at the time for the youth. And on the bracelet, it was from Luke chapter, it was a verse reference, like Luke chapter 18, verse 1 or 1:18 or something like that. And it just said on the bracelet, always pray, never lose heart. That's all it said. Plus the reference of the verse, where that's sort of from, or what it's based on. So I took off my bracelet and I was like, look, I don't know if this means anything to you, but I wanted to give you my bracelet. And then she took the bracelet and she was smiling. And she said to me, I never left the church. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, to be honest, I didn't ask. Like I wasn't planning on asking that question. I was like, okay. She's like, you're going to ask me why? In my head again, I'm thinking, I got no choice now. So I was like, oh, why? Why didn't you leave the church? And she's like, because the church is the only place where I learned to find comfort. This is a woman that had every reason. You wouldn't have blamed her for leaving the church. It was the church that hurt her in the first place. Or you could say that. But her response was, I endured, and it's in that place where I found comfort. It was in the embrace of God that I found comfort. It was in the embrace of God that I found company in times of trial. And so she never left the church. And so I guess we have our three answers. But like I said at the beginning, it's a tough topic to discuss because those aren't the only three answers to those questions. You know, what kind of struggles warrant the grace of God? All of them. Because He's a loving Father and He cares about anything I'm going through, however unimportant it may seem. How will He show His grace in times of struggle? Like I said, many answers: peace, joy. The one that I love the most is company. He shows His grace by giving us His presence. And where is His grace when I need it the most? God sometimes waits. He waits till I hit rock bottom, because it's at rock bottom where I realize that He's the only one with grace enough to bring me out. And glory be to God forevermore. Amen. Maybe went for too long, so does anyone have any questions? All right, thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. Great as always. So you were saying that through our struggles, and you turned to Moses and Elijah as an example, right? That we should turn to prayer, right? And that's what these two biblical figures did. Do you find though that if we turn to God only in times of struggles, that we can be using Him as a vending machine?
Yeah, I guess that's the universal, that's the timeless question. I don't think so. I think struggles can be good for us. Struggles can be, like I said, like it can be an opportunity to be transformed. It can be an opportunity for us to have a relationship with God. Some people rely on struggles to have a relationship with God. But I don't think there's anything wrong with redirecting whatever's going on in my life towards God at any time in my life. If that becomes the catalyst for me having a relationship with God, then that struggle was a blessing in my life. That's why we say, I look back on certain periods in my life where I was going through darkness, I was going through pain, I was going through whatever, and that's when my relationship with God sort of blossomed. We look back and we say that was the best time in my life because of that reason. So no, I don't think it's using Him as a vending machine. Rather, it's not using Him. I don't want to use the word using God, but I think it's an opportunity to give God an opening into my life. And we're only using Him as a vending machine if we come with requests. Notice that Moses and Elijah didn't come with any requests. If I'm going through struggle because I can't find a job, and I say, God, this is the job I want, then I'm giving Him a blueprint as to how I want Him to solve that issue, right? And I'll be very upset if that's not the job I get. But if I come to God and say, God, I don't have a job, I'm unemployed, and I just present the problem to Him, then I'm giving Him an opening into my life. I'm giving Him an opportunity to do something. And we know, like you hear stories from everyone around you that God does things in His own way, right? I never expected to be at this place, but this is how God ordained it. Because that's the way that we've been taught to approach God, that we approach Him with the problem, not the solution. It's biblical. Again, St. Paul, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, make your request known to God. Just known. Make your issue known to Him. Just let Him know this is the issue at hand. I'm leaving it in your hands. That's now your problem. Saint Mary, I love the story of the wedding of Cana, because we've sort of, I think we've taken that out of a lot of context. At the wedding of Cana, did Mary ask Christ to do anything? She didn't actually make a request. Notice that it says she went to Him and just said, they have no wine. In John 2. She just said, they have no wine. And then He says, what's your concern have to do with me? And then she turns to the servants, knowing that he was going to solve the issue in his own way, without giving him any instructions. And she says, whatever he says to you, do it. Because the way we need to the way we need to approach God is exactly that we present the problem to him, not the solution. And that way we remove that vending machine relationship. And it's rather, I'm giving you an opportunity into my life, because that's all he wants. What God wants more than anything is an opportunity to enter my life. Any other questions, comments? Does anyone have a comment on that question or an answer to that question that's better than mine?
I didn't have any. I just got a different question. What's the best strategy to patiently wait for God to show up?
I was reading something nice. I'll just quickly open it up. But the question was, what's the best strategy to patiently waiting for God to show up? I think the best strategy, ironically, is thanksgiving. To be thankful during my trials. If you notice in the Bible, there's a lot of that that premature thanksgiving. If you look at the story of Jonah, in Jonah chapter 2, while he's in the belly of the whale, he says, out of the depths of Sheol, you have delivered me. He's still in, the belly of the whale. And then he says, you have redeemed my life. But he's still, again, in the belly of the whale. And he's giving thanks to God while he's still in his suffering. Because, gratitude is our way of putting our trust in God no matter the circumstances in my life. I've been reading this book. It's called Crash the Chatterbox. It's by a pastor in America by the name of Stephen Furtick. And one of those things is he talks about how do we crash the negative thoughts when I'm going through trials and tribulations? How do I crash these negative thoughts? And the answer he gives is thanking God. And these are just two quotes from the book. He says, gratitude is thanking God in advance for things that will only make sense in reverse. Does that make sense? Gratitude is thanking God in advance for what will only make sense in reverse. Will only make sense in reverse. Because like I said, we were just talking about it just now. When I look back on the struggles in my life, I'm thankful for them. Because they brought me to where I am. None of us would be here right now if it wasn't for every struggle we've ever been through. None of us would be in the situations we are right now if it wasn't for all the trials that we had to endure. And another thing he says is gratitude reinterprets the situations in our lives, beginning with the baseline acknowledgement that we don't deserve anything that we've been given in the first place. Grace is undeserved. We don't deserve it. But if I'm grateful for, if I acknowledge, first of all, that I don't deserve anything in my life, then I'm grateful for everything that I have in the first place. Father Anthony Messa has a really beautiful talk on finding the strength to go on. And his first piece of advice is to learn to give thanks in all situations. He says that because thanksgiving and depression can't coexist. They don't. And we see all the greats in the Bible, they lived their life by thanksgiving. That's why they were able to endure so much hardship. I actually think the only person who might match Job in terms of level of hardship is Jacob. I think Jacob's life of struggle is really underrated as well. He was sent far from home because his brother wanted to kill him. And then, his father-in-law made him work 14 years for the girl he really wanted. And then his brother threatened to kill him. And then he lost his wife in childbirth. And then he lost Joseph. And then he lost Simeon. And then he thought he was going to lose Benjamin. His life was miserable. Like it was non-stop. Not to mention all the things in between. Finding a wife in the first place. All these things just compounding each other. And then when he eventually sees Joseph and he comes to bless his sons, he prays in Genesis 49 or 48 and he says, the first thing prayer he says, you'd expect this deep, profound prayer. Jacob's about to pray the first prayer after having his whole family reunited. After seeing his son Joseph for the first time in 17 years, he's going to say this profound prayer. And the first prayer he says is, I thank the Lord who has fed me all my life. And you just think this guy's been in Egypt too long. The first thing he prays about is food. Like after all this, there must be a wog. But it just shows his nature. He shows his character as someone who, because he learned to live a life of thanksgiving, he was able to see God's hand in all the little things in his life. So when the big things came along, he was able to endure. Because he learned to give thanks in the very small things. So I think the best tactic to enduring times of struggle is to give thanks to God in advance for what only makes sense in reverse. Okay, we'll stop there. Glory be to God for a moment.
All right. Thank you, Mark, for that wonderful message. It's definitely one that we can all relate to. Like Mark said there in the beginning of the talk, we all of us, right, regardless of who we are, right, we have our own struggle. We are not meant to compare what we have going on compared to someone else, but we can use that all as an opportunity, right, regardless how trivial or how small you might consider it to be. It's all an opportunity to turn to God, and that's the most important thing, right? At the end of the day, God's after our hearts and our soul, and yeah, we can use these opportunities, right? So thank you again, and thank you all for participating. Okay, so a few announcements, right? As usual, we have Tuesday night Bible study happening in the hall from 8 to 9. It's with Father Gabriel. It's really good to start seeing people show up. Like, we're having a lot more people coming and attending. It's been a lot of fun. It's just for those that might not be aware. It's not so much your traditional Bible study where Abuna just sits there and reads the chapter or passage or whatever it is and explains it. It's more so a discussion, right? So Abuna comes, he just lays the context. It's like explains a few things, and then the rest of the night ends up being an open discussion, and we all engage in each other's ideas and thoughts. Lately we've been discussing Daniel, right? It's on the book of Daniel, and we've actually just been on the first chapter, right? So the first 3 weeks have been spent on the first chapter. That's how much there is in this, right? Talking about how Daniel is able to make like conscious decisions and how he's able to reject anything that is against his customs and his beliefs. Last week we spoke about how Daniel and his friends were able to endure all things and get through pretty much all these struggles, but through the grace of God and the will of God, they were able to stay strong. So please, if you can, 8 to 9 on a Tuesday Bible study, right? There's also an announcement that just got sent to me, right? So there is a service going on. It's through Pre-Servants. So the guys over from Pre-Servants are doing this thing where they're collecting presents for the less fortunate. Now they're looking for a present, right, between $25 to $30. If you can help out, that'll be good. They want something small, right? Nothing. They don't want any violent toys like toy guns or anything. I'm sure you guys can guess why they don't want that. But something small like a T-shirt or shoes or something between that price range of $25 to $30, it'll be good to help out and spread that Christmas joy. Monica, do we have any food today? No, nothing. Sorry, maybe food. Now, has everyone finished uni like for the year? Anyone still going? No, we're all done. You finished?